What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where, as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above. We did go ahead and remove Ripple from our watch list, and instead, we'll start to make Mana USD a little bit more of a permanent resident. So, with that quick update out of the way, let's jump right into our Bitcoin daily time frame chart. What's been going on since the last time we checked in? Well, you can clearly see that our inverted head and shoulders, which had potential to hold up here at the support trend line, something like that, well, yeah, clearly it didn't. Right? So because of that, we are more in a neutral trend, right? There's not really a clean reversal pattern that's expressing itself. You can start to think of Bitcoin as trading in this sideways range here. If we do something like this, we're almost at the midpoint of the range. Now, if you've been watching the channel for any period of time, you know what I'm about to say. Whenever you're at the midpoint of a range, this is not, I repeat, not where your opportunity exists. Your opportunity is much better at the top end for either a breakout or a mean reversion type trade, and the same is true but opposite at the bottom, mean reversion type trade or a breakdown. Why is that, you may ask? Well, because we have clear places for our stop loss to go, right? If we're at the top of the range and we're looking for mean reversion, stop loss obviously goes right above. The same is true but opposite at the bottom. If you're bottom fishing and you're looking for the bounce, stop loss goes just underneath, right? Because if it breaks down, it's likely to continue. So it may seem like very obvious stuff, but as of right now, I hate to say it, I think Bitcoin is more of a patience play until we get to one of these levels. And just to give you those numbers, it's 45,800 on the upside, and to the downside, we have 34,350. Okay, so what else can we learn or look into at least? If I do something like this and scrunch the chart up again, well, we are in a fairly aggressive downtrend on our daily time frame, right? Clear lower highs. We also have clear lower lows. So the bears are in control, and the fact that we do have an equal low here would suggest that if we roll over off the midpoint of the range, and remember, it's 50-50 here. It could go higher, could go lower. We're right in the middle. No one knows for sure. But if it does roll over for another lower high, so from here to here, lower high, and we can reattempt this equal low area once again in short proximity of time, again, if you've watched the channel for any period of time, you know that that is basically a flush point, and we're looking for lower after that. The target would be roughly $30,000 in Bitcoin, which is coming from this big floor of support, this zone back here, where it really spent some time and the big rally sort of stemmed from. So that's what we have on our daily time frame chart. I think it's a patience play. Even if you were convinced that it has to be long, if you're starting to read into this as a hammer candle, that's fine. But you know, you need to, your risk reward needs to make sense. Are you going to take it long here with a stop underneath here for a move to here? That's about a 1-to-1. I wouldn't call you insane for doing that, but I don't think the odds are in your favor, right? That risk reward doesn't make too much sense. If you were intent on calling this a double bottom, then where's the breakout point, right? It's up and over the neckline, which is also, as we expressed, the top end of this range we just discussed. So I think it's patience here inside of Bitcoin, as we've just sort of uncovered. There's no clean setup that's really presenting itself that I can at least see as of right now. So those are the two scenarios to watch out for. Next up, we have Ethereum, and Ethereum's a little bit different here. And the reason I say that is because in Ethereum, we have not broken our resistance trend line. So if this can break, then that would be a reason, right? The market's always looking for any reason to make a directional move. If we break that, maybe that's enough of a reason. People see that as a technical breakout, right? And we make a move to the top of the range. Don't get me wrong. We're still trading in a range. We have equal lows, and we have this area of prior support, which then turned to resistance. That's the top of the range, right? We are technically in the midpoint, but there's at least an idea here, right? Whereas if we break this resistance trend line, maybe we rotate to the top of the box. The stop loss would go underneath on the case where it's a fake break, right? So that to me makes a little bit more sense than just buying Bitcoin in the midpoint of its range. So I wanted to talk about that here in Ethereum. The other thing, of course, is the same in terms of if this is a double bottom, the more conservative trader is still just being patient for the top of the range, looking for breakouts up and over our critical number. And in Ethereum, it's going to be 3162 on the upside, and to the downside, we have 2310. Now, something to be at least aware of, especially if you're trying to play long here, is where's our next support underneath 2310? It's coming from way back in here. There's quite a ways to fall, right? Instead of 30K Bitcoin, which is fairly close, at least in Ethereum, there's a lot of room to fall here. There's a lot of range. That's 1774 as your next support, right? So please be aware of that if you're trying to play it long here. If you're not a disciplined trader and you can't stick to a stop loss that's underneath here, let's say you know it does roll over and you're looking for a bottom fishing play, something like that. If you can't stick to a stop loss, it's probably not the trade for you trying to bottom fish here. Those of you who can't really have that self-discipline, and again, it's not like it's an easy thing to do. I'm not judging you for not being able to do that, but you're probably waiting being more patient for the more conservative trade once the trend starts to reverse itself up and over here for your long entries. Sure, you're not going to catch the absolute bottom, but you'll have more confirmation, right? So those are some thoughts here inside of Ethereum. On the upside, if we do break the top of the range, which again, there's still a long way to go before we even get there, but the next target would be up here, 36.58. Let's continue along and talk about Binance Coin. This one clearly breaking the support trend line, just like what we had in Bitcoin. So we will remove that, no longer really in play. There's some differences in this one as well. So sure, we do have a range. We have lows, we have highs, we have lows once again, a little bit of a bounce, but you can clearly see how well defined this level is in the midpoint of the range. So on this one, I wouldn't call you crazy. If we get to here and we start printing an inverted hammer, if we start printing indecision dojis, basically things that would indicate that the buyers are running out of steam, maybe it's short under the lows for an equal low down below, and then a stop loss over the highs. It would make sense based on prior structure, whereas we don't really have that in our Bitcoin daily time frame, right? So that's a little bit of a more nuanced thing to pay attention to here inside of Binance Coin. It would also be a lower high. So something that does this, as we discussed with almost everything else so far, equal low there, we would look for trend follow through. Just noting that we have been continuously producing lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and we would be looking for essentially, instead of an equal low, a lower low to just continue the daily trend, right? So that's what I've got for you here inside of Binance Coin. I suppose we should also find that next downside target. Just like in Ethereum, it's quite a ways away. If 335.30 breaks, we're looking at a move into 259. Just to give you those other levels, the midpoint of the range here is going to be 393. The top of the range, if it's going to be a breakout, is up and over 434 with a target around 500. As of right now, the bears have a little bit of an upper edge in my estimation, just because unlike what we saw in Ethereum and Bitcoin, I would say that this one is arguably in the lower third as opposed to closer to the midpoint of the range, okay? That's Binance Coin in a nutshell. Continuing on here, talking about Cardano, the weakest thing that we've seen so far, really not producing any sort of bounce along with the majors that we've seen. So this one, no reason to be fishing for longs here. Sure, you could get a little bit of a back test of that $1 all-important level, but are you really going to trade for, I don't know, what would that be, 12 cents in Cardano? I think there are better opportunities across the crypto marketplace right now. So I wouldn't really be fishing for longs in this one, I suppose, is what I'm getting at here. The relative weakness is just so pronounced. The lower low that we've already made, it didn't even come in for an equal low. Lower highs already, right? Not really getting any follow through to the upside on this most recent crypto bounce. It doesn't strike me as the coin to really be trading right now. So I wouldn't really watch this one. Anything underneath our 80 cent-ish level, we know there's some room to fall, right? Prior breakout point was way down there, around 41 cents. So if you get it wrong, trying to be a long here, and it falls all the way there, I mean, not to insult anyone's intelligence, but that's a 50% loss, right? Which would mean to get back to break even, you would need a 100% gain. How often does that happen in crypto? I suppose more often than the stock market, but you get my gist, right? There's a lot of work that would need to be done if you're long from here, comes down here, and you're trying to work your way back to break even. Not a good situation to be in. So Cardano, probably an avoid as of right now. Solana up next, clearly still relatively weak, kind of just like Cardano in that sense. However, not a lower low, right? You can see equal lows here, still underneath our tertiary resistance trend line. So from that perspective, yes, if you were to start thinking about this box as the equivalent ranges as to what we discussed in Bitcoin and Ethereum, yeah, it's well below the midpoint, right? And there's really kind of a lack of follow through from this most recent bounce. I would totally give you that. So the thing here is, if the rest of the crypto marketplace gets follow through to the upside, then this is still low enough, close enough to support, where I wouldn't call you crazy stabbing long here on the break of the resistance trend line. Stop loss goes back down underneath 82, or let's just call it 83, we'll round up here, and the target's the top end, right? Top end of the range here, which is closer to 120. So that could be a reasonable trade inside of Solana if the entire crypto marketplace sort of starts to pick back up, noting that it's still close enough to support where your risk reward makes sense, right? You're trading essentially for this reward box right here. Your risk box is kind of this one down below. That might be something like a 2-to-1, maybe 1.5-to-1. As soon as you can move your stop to break even, that makes sense to do so, and you have a risk-free trade on your hands, right? So that's something to consider here inside of Solana. Hammer candles, yeah, they did print just like everything else with a lower wick, but again, the difference here is that we're still close enough to support. We do technically still have equal lows. If it's a rotation there, maybe it makes sense. So Solana, keep an eye on it into this upcoming weekend. Next up, we have Link. Actually, you know what? Let me go back to Solana. I want to be thorough in all of my analyses here. If we do break down and this, sort of gets another lower high, equal low, then your breakdown point is to 66. Okay, I wanted to provide that number. Now let's move along over to Link. This one, new lower low, clearly in a little bit of an aggressive downtrend right here. So we can draw that in as something to watch for. This one doesn't really strike me as a good long opportunity, just noting where the wick is here. So do you want to take it long here for, resistance right overhead on the back test of 15? It doesn't really make sense to me. The breakout of the resistance trendline is probably more attractive for the rotation here up to around 18, a $3 move inside of Link, probably something worth watching out for. You could also think of it as a look below and fail. If that happens and we cross above 15, we know the target is technically the top end of the range, which is 18. So it doesn't matter how you look at the setup, but that would be a bullish sort of move here inside of Link, okay? So that's one way to look at it. If we resist, so do something like this, then it's a break, retest, failure. So again, be on the lookout for those inverted hammers, indecision doji candles that print, anything that makes you question the strength of the buyers. You're looking for at least the equal low to the lower wick there, which is roughly 1140. And then underneath that, 1050 is your next target, right? So that's what we have in Link. I would primarily just see what the reaction is at 15. So if you only watch one thing on Link, make it $15 even, all right? Continuing along and talking about Polkadot, relative weakness here. Again, just like what we discussed in Solana, it was because we're still, at the low end of this. Let's just call this the range, correct? Because we're still close enough to support here. If you wanted to trade for a move into potentially the top of the range in here 23, the risk reward makes sense, right? If that's your reward box and your risk is kind of here underneath the low of that prior hammer candle in there, that makes sense. It's about a 2 to 1, maybe 2 1/4 to 1. I could see that. You will have to contend with, of course, that resistance trend line. So maybe if you can move your stop loss to break even as quick as possible, that would be something worth investigating. But in Polkadot, maybe it's a long here, right? Off of this support, if the rest of the crypto market rallies, if Bitcoin can hold that sort of midway of the range, move to the top of the box, maybe Polkadot and some of these smaller coins start to follow, right? So I wouldn't call you crazy for starting to think about these setups inside of these things. But in the majors, right, we need to see that follow through to the top of the boxes that we've been discussing so far. To the downside, if we fail at the resistance trendline and roll over, your target's roughly $12.75. The upside break, if you were patient and waiting for this zone right here, could be $18 to $19. If that goes, your rotation is up to $23.35. All right, those are the numbers. Next up, we have Crypto.com coin. This one has the potential. This is the only one we've seen so far where there could be a higher low instead of an equal or a lower low, right? So if this hammer candle ultimately does hold, we can do something like this. I'm just splitting the difference between some of these lows in here. The lower wick would obviously be, much more strict if we did something like that. I'm splitting the difference, right? That's, for me, we're looking at trends. We don't need to be so exact. We just want to make sure that we're continuously producing higher lows. So as long as we're above that support trend line, I would say the break of this level here, 43 cents, could get interesting for a rotation here. Why is that, you may ask? Well, because if we break that, pull back for a higher low and do something like that, there's your stop loss, right? Your target's up here, makes sense from a risk-reward perspective. If we do something like this, fine, we're building a pressure cooker top, small ascending triangle, stop loss goes underneath the support trend line, looking for a move here, and then the breakout, right? And that starts to make sense from a risk-reward perspective as well, noting that you're looking at least 1.5, maybe 2 to 1, right? So that's what I see in Crypto.com coin. If it does break the support trend line, then we fill up the triangle, equal low will be closer to 32 cents. That's what I've got for you in that one. Let's move along here and talk about Matic. Relative weakness, just like some of the other coins, not Crypto.com coin, obviously, but Polkadot, Solana, you get the gist, right? So we do technically have the lower low, equal low-ish area. If we make the move higher, again, your resistance trend line is fairly strong and intact. We have 1, 2, 3 interactions here. This is clearly a lower high from the resistance trend line, so that was relative weakness, right? So that would be your primary target. So from 153 up to 170, I don't know. To me, that doesn't. I think there are better opportunities that we've discussed so far in the crypto market. I wouldn't really be watching out for that, especially noting that that was prior strong resistance as well, then flipped support for a little bit there, and then in that upper wick, it was also resistance. So to me, that's a little bit of a sketchy move. Where are you going to place your stop loss, right? Is it going to be down under here? That doesn't make sense for sure, right? So in this one, I would be more patient and I would want to see confirmation, higher low, something that sets up a break of the resistance trend line to trade for that range right there, right? Because then the stop loss can go here. Now you're risking this to potentially make that. That's, again, closer to 1.5 to 1, maybe 2 to 1, somewhere in that range, okay? The numbers to watch, the break of the resistance trend line, that horizontal level is 170. The target up there is about $2 even, and you would want to see that higher low above 150, okay? Luna is up next, Terra. on an absolute rampage, right? You can clearly see we had this sort of ascending triangle, so you did get that higher low here, equal highs, broke it, and is continuing to rally. We're also above prior support, which then flipped to resistance in this area, so we're kind of at that zone, right? So to me, I would not be chasing this one long here. However, any higher low pullbacks that are above the breakout point here at 58.61 should be buyable, okay? So as long as we pull back and it's a healthy pullback and we, see the turn, so hammer candles, higher lows start forming on smaller time frames, and it's above 58.61, that's probably a decent shot at a long here inside of Luna, looking for the rotation back higher into 81. That's also, again, depending on how you want to look at this type of pattern, if you see it as a double bottom, if that's easier to recognize for you, it's just holding the neckline, correct? So that's what I would watch out for here. If we break down underneath the breakout point, the neckline, whatever you want to call it, underneath 58, it needs to hold the support trend line. And then there, maybe that's where you reassess, right? If we start printing a hammer candle down here, indecision dojis, that may be an attractive spot for a reversal, noting that it could produce a higher low, tight risk reward. Your risk goes just underneath, right? Stop loss there, looking for a rotation at least to the prior breakout point here around 58, if not higher, right? So that's Luna in a nutshell. Let's continue along. Last one on our list, the new coin to the block, which is Mana. This one doesn't look so hot. I mean, sure, you could look at this as a higher low, definitely, but double top still underneath that neckline. I would be patient in this one if we want to respect this trading range here, and it's going to be a look below and fail. We know that we have to recapture 283 for the rotation into $3.45, 350-ish. That would be something I would watch out for, but just kind of chopping around in here, it doesn't really strike me as something playable. I suppose if we can put in enough of a range, then again, you get a breakout or mean reversion at the top, mean reversion or a breakdown at the bottom. Those levels to watch out for are $2.83, as I mentioned prior, and the bottom end of this range, the higher low technically from here to here, is $2.36. As long as we hold 236, fine. Maybe you have a little bit more of a bullish slant here inside of Mana, especially if the rest of the crypto market really starts picking up and starting to deliver up and over the top end of those major ranges that we discussed, namely in Bitcoin and Ethereum, okay? That's really going to wrap up today's analysis. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything new, feel free to leave a comment down below or just simply give the video a thumbs up. That is very much appreciated around here. Don't forget that our weekly watch list will come out on Sunday as scheduled, and I wish you all a green trading week.